I'm Diana. I flew to Italy thinking I was helping plan my mother's birthday tour, only to find out I'd been written out of my own family, seat by seat, line by line, face by face. They gave my role to someone else. They edited me out of the video. They even said I didn't belong. So I canceled the entire European tour because it was my name on every contract. But the truth is, this didn't start in Florence. It started years ago, with silences, sideways looks, and secrets no one thought I'd ever uncover. How does a mother erase her own daughter? And how do you stay strong when the people you love choose to pretend you're invisible? The night air was warm, thick with the kind of Tuscan summer that clings to your skin like silk and sweat. I stood just outside the rooftop restaurant, watching my family trail in ahead of me like I wasn't even there. No one turned around, not even Callum. We were in Florence for Odessa's 70th. My mother's grand European birthday tour, planned down to the minute, every reservation handpicked by me. Flights, menus, villas, even the goddamn floral arrangements. The entire trip was a gift from my company, but apparently even that wasn't enough to earn me a chair. I scanned the long table set beneath twinkling lights and manicured olive trees. Each name card was scripted in soft gold calligraphy. I didn't see mine. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't tremble. That would have meant I was surprised. "Sweetheart," Odessa cooed when I stepped closer. Her voice always had that razor sugar tone that made strangers think she was elegant. "Maybe you're tired. You don't have to stay for the whole dinner." There it was. The kind of sentence that's wrapped in a smile, but meant to push you quietly out of the room. Callum cleared his throat, barely looking up. "Maybe someone just miscounted," he said half-heartedly. His arm brushed against Vivian's. His new arm candy. Her eyes flicked up, blinked once, then shifted away. "Miscounted. You don't miscount your own daughter at a table of 13. I looked again. Every place card was aligned with precision. Napkins folded just right. Wine glasses already filled. The table was perfect. It was always perfect when I designed it. Except tonight, there was one intentional absence. I gave a small nod and stepped away before my voice cracked. Inside the hallway that led to the staff prep area, I paused. I wasn't sure if I needed to breathe or scream. That's when a server, Marco, I remembered his name, approached me, hesitating. "Signora Halden." He lowered his voice, glancing over his shoulder. "Your name was on the chart this morning." I saw it myself. But this afternoon, a new version came through. "Your name was removed. I'm sorry." His apology landed softer than it should have, like he didn't expect me to be shocked. And I wasn't. Not really. I nodded again, whispered, "Thank you," and turned to face the full-length mirror beside the wine cabinet. I studied the woman staring back. Hair pinned, dress flawless, lips just bold enough. Everything on me had been chosen to look like I belonged. And still, no seat. This wasn't the first time she'd done this. Not in this way, no. But my mother had made an art of cutting me out in slow, deliberate motions for years. When I was 11, she invited all my cousins to see the Nutcracker in New York for Christmas. Except me. Her excuse? "You had the flu, darling." Except I didn't. I had a spelling bee. At 17, she told me Callum wasn't a long-term man. At 29, she made sure our wedding photographer got more photos of her than me. I was always just slightly out of frame. And now, at 38, here we were again. I was still just outside the shot. I walked back toward the dining area, the clinking of glasses and laughter folding into a low, contemptuous hum. They were mid-toast. Odessa raised her flute and smiled like a woman being crowned queen of her own fairy tale. I stood at the edge of the table, behind Callum. He didn't turn. I waited until the laughter dipped, until the silence wrapped its fingers around the moment like a warning. "Seems I'm not family," I said. Not loud, not soft, just clear. 12 heads turned. Vivian blinked. Odessa's smile twitched. Callum's shoulder tensed. That was the line they didn't rehearse for. No one reached for me. No one stood. No one said my name. I turned and walked away. As I passed the servers, one of them nodded at me, not in pity, but in recognition. And somehow, that was the kindest thing anyone had offered me all night. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just walked into the elevator, alone, in the dress I'd paid for a dinner I wasn't meant to attend. And when the doors closed, I let the quiet swallow me whole. "Seems I'm not family," I said, steady as the silverware I'd handpicked for a seat I was never meant to fill. I didn't cry when I left the rooftop, but I didn't sleep either. My suite at the Grand Palazzo was as immaculate as I'd designed it to be. Elegant crown molding, floor-to-ceiling views of Florence, a king bed made with military precision. And yet, it felt like a cage. I stood at the edge of the balcony, watching the Arno stretch into the distance, glowing under the Tuscan moonlight. In my head, I wasn't seeing rivers or bridges. I was replaying the way Odessa had said, "Maybe you're tired, sweetheart." That's the kind of thing you say when you've already decided someone doesn't belong. I pulled out my tablet, opened the itinerary, checked every line. My name was listed across every page, initials marked on vendor contracts, emails from my staff cross-referenced. Every ounce of this tour had my fingerprints on it. Yet somehow, I was invisible. The next morning, a thin envelope was slid under my door. Gold-trimmed, cream cardstock, the press itinerary. I didn't remember requesting it. Inside was the agenda for the week's media events. Interviews, photo shoots, the scheduled press walk at the gala entrance. My name wasn't on it. Not even in the credits as event producer. Vivian's name was, though. Twice. Once as Odessa's legacy partner, and again as brand liaison. I called Marco, my publicist, without hesitation. He answered on the third ring, his voice brittle. "Diana, hey, look, I thought..." He paused. "Odessa said you weren't interested in the press portion, that you'd prefer to stay behind the scenes this time." "She said that?" "That's what I was told. I assumed you signed off. She said you were feeling overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. That was a new one. Last month, she called me controlling during a vendor call. Last year, it was too ambitious for someone without a PR background. I didn't raise my voice, didn't defend. I just thanked him and hung up. Later that afternoon, I walked into the conference suite to review lighting for the birthday tribute. Vivienne was already at the podium, trying out angles in front of a small AV crew. She looked radiant, perfect waves, lipstick that matched her blazer, hands moving like she belonged there. I stepped closer and asked the coordinator where the speaking notes were. He handed me a folder labeled Vivienne Keynote. Odessa walked in just as I opened it. "Oh, Diana," she smiled, like this was all perfectly reasonable. "I thought we talked about this. Vivian's taking the toast this year. She's got a fresh voice, something that connects with the younger generation. You know how the press loves that." I don't remember nodding, but I must have. That's what people like her count on, you freezing just long enough for them to move on. I excused myself and went back to my suite, where I opened the bottom drawer of my luggage and pulled out the leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in months. On a blank page, I wrote, "They don't just want me gone, they want me forgotten." Then I underlined it. A memory crept up before I could push it down. I was 8. Odessa had helped organize a holiday recital at my school. I was assigned the opening monologue, a silly but sweet poem about snowflakes and winter wishes. The night before the show, she took me aside and said, "I moved your part to Jenny. You're strong enough to handle disappointment. She isn't." I'd smiled. I always did. That's what good daughters do. Until they don't. I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "You're not 8 anymore." And I meant it. The game had changed, but the players hadn't. Odessa still pulled the strings. Vivienne was happy to dance. Callum stayed just detached enough to keep his conscience intact. But me? I was done waiting for a seat. If they were rewriting the family narrative, they'd soon remember. I was the one holding the pen. I stayed quiet, but I didn't disappear. That evening, I arrived at the hotel ballroom earlier than scheduled. The chandeliers had just been lit, and the scent of polished marble still clung to the air. Tech crews were adjusting spotlights. The AV table was a mess of cables, screens, and someone's half-eaten biscotti. I moved through the room like I belonged there. Because I did. Because I built this. Every fabric choice, every lighting cue, every inch of ambiance had my signature beneath it, even if no one could see it. Marco spotted me and gave a quick nod. "We're loading the final tribute video. Want to preview?" I answered with a short, "Yes," and folded my arms. My posture said professional detachment. My heart said watch carefully. The screen flickered to life. The first images were old footage. Super 8 home movies Odessa used to have transferred years ago. There I was, age 6, clinging to her skirt during a museum gala. Then on a pony at a family ranch event. School photos, birthday cake moments. My throat tightened, not because of nostalgia, because I could feel what was coming. And I was right. By the halfway point, I vanished. The rest of the montage was Odessa's recent triumphs, awards, interviews, photo shoots, and in every public frame beside her, Vivian, shaking hands with charity partners, laughing backstage with Odessa, accepting flowers at a fashion event. My mother's voiceover played like a eulogy to herself. "I've always believed legacy is about who stands beside you, not just where you've been, but who you trust to carry the light forward." I didn't blink, not once. Instead, I turned to the AV tech and said, "Can I see the cue sheet for the slideshow?" He handed it to me. A laminated checklist, color-coded. Segment 1, Odessa, Early Vision. Segment 2, Odessa plus Protégé. Segment 3, Odessa Legacy Speech, Vivienne, Live. There was no Segment 4, no mention of me, not even as a producer, not even as background. This wasn't a tribute, this was a transfer of power. I took a photo of the cue sheet with my phone. 2 angles, no flash. "You okay?" Marco asked, his voice trying to be casual. "I'm great," I replied, "just confirming we're on schedule." He gave me a look, the kind people give when they know something's off, but don't want to be the one to name it. Then he turned back to the monitors. My steps were slow as I left the ballroom, not because I was tired, because I was calculating. Back in my suite, I opened the archive folder on my tablet, where I kept documentation from every major event I'd ever designed. I uploaded the photo of the cue sheet, labeled it Odessa Tribute Erasure Proof. It wasn't for revenge, it was for memory, for the record, for the next time someone asked, "Are you sure this wasn't just a mistake?" Because it never was. A knock on the door broke the silence. Room service. I hadn't ordered anything, but the staff smiled and handed me a covered tray. Beneath the lid, 1 espresso, 1 handwritten card. Vivienne's handwriting. "She's earned this. Please don't make it about you. V." I laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't bitter, it was just tired. Because this is what happens when people are trying to replace you. They don't fight you directly, they fade you out, gradually, softly, so that when you're gone, no one notices you left. The next morning, I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. My first solo feature in Chicago Celebrates magazine. I was 26. I'd landed the piece on merit. No name-dropping, no strings pulled. I was so proud I printed a high-gloss copy, framed it, and mailed it to Odessa with a note that said, "In case you want to add it to your office." She never replied. Years later, while helping her assistant move boxes into a storage unit, I found it. Still wrapped in brown paper. Never opened. She'd labeled it, "Miscellaneous Press, Diana Miscellaneous." I returned to the present with that memory still hanging on me like smoke. Vivian had a section, a title, a platform, and I had a drawer in a dusty closet no one opened. But here's the thing about closets. They don't stay closed forever. I wrote a new note to myself in my journal. If they were trying to delete me quietly, I would make my return loudly. You can't erase someone who built the foundation under your feet. I repeated that sentence like a mantra as I stepped out of the elevator, heading back to my room. But the second the door slid open, I froze. Callum and Vivian were standing directly outside my door, laughing about something, wine glasses in hand. Her fingers trailed lazily down his sleeve. His back was turned toward me, but hers wasn't. She saw me immediately, smiled. "Long day?" she asked, her tone sweet like syrup poured over something spoiled. I didn't answer, just slipped past them, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. As the latch clicked shut behind me, I stood there a full minute. No breath, no thought, just stillness so tight it hurt. That placement wasn't coincidence. The next morning, I made my way down to the concierge. I asked, as calmly as I could, if a room change might be possible, something a little more removed. The young woman at the desk hesitated, typing quickly, then smiled that practiced hospitality smile. "I'm afraid that might be difficult, Ms. Halden. Mrs. Halden requested all family suites be kept close together for unity. It's part of the VIP coordination list." I nodded slowly. Of course she did. It wasn't just the room beside mine. To my right were two other doors, Odessa's personal glam team, the press liaison suite. I was surrounded, like a buffer or a wall. That night, after confirming final logistics with the restaurant, I returned to find the hallway dim and too quiet. I stepped into my room and immediately heard them. Muffled laughter, clinking glass. A chair scraped tile just on the other side of the wall. I tried turning on white noise. It helped, but didn't erase the sound of Vivian's voice rising in mock surprise. Callum's chuckle answering back. I didn't miss the marriage. I missed the version of myself who still believed it had been real. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling. Odessa had once said, "Marriage is about strategy, not sentiment. You learn that if you want to survive." I was 22 when she said it, 1 month before our engagement party. I thought she was being cynical. Now I think she was being honest. The next morning, I opened my door to head down to breakfast. As I did, I noticed a crisp envelope resting against Vivian's door. I picked it up out of instinct, then saw the label stamped in gold. "Dinner with Odessa, inner circle only." No envelope had come to me. I turned it over slowly. Vivian's name was on the seal. Just then, her door opened. "Oops! Didn't mean to eavesdrop," she said, taking the envelope from my hand without hesitation. "It's just a small thing. Really more for people who understand where the legacy's heading." I stared at her for a beat too long. She didn't blink. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I turned away, walked down the hall, and ordered a black coffee so bitter it made my teeth sting. Then I returned to my room, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the event's legal paperwork, not for changes, for leverage. Because this wasn't just about speeches and seating charts anymore. They were trying to build something new without me. Pretend I was never the one who taught them how to throw a gala, how to win a crowd, how to make a legacy shine. But I've been behind the scenes long enough to know there's no spotlight without someone managing the electricity. I wrote a new line in my journal, underlined twice. They think they're winning because I'm quiet. But I've been planning events for decades. The biggest scenes happen behind the curtains. They put me next to the mess they made, maybe so I'd watch it burn. But I've lit enough stages to know exactly when to cut the lights. I was up before sunrise. The city hadn't stirred yet, but I had. I slipped into the conference suite where the final printouts were being assembled. Event brochures, media kits, name placards, sponsor packets. Everything looked polished, flawless, expensive. Except for one thing. My name wasn't anywhere. Not under executive event producer, not in the team acknowledgements, not even in the back credits where they usually thank the florist and transportation vendor. It was like I never touched the event, and I had touched everything. I didn't say a word. I took one of the brochures and tucked it under my arm, like a case file. 10 minutes later, I was back in my suite when my phone dinged with an incoming email. Subject line: Updated visuals. Confirm ASAP. It had come from Odessa's assistant, but what caught my eye was that I'd been CC'd accidentally. I opened the thread, scrolled, and there it was. Odessa's message, sent 4 days ago. Let's keep Diana out of the promotional visuals. It confuses the brand hierarchy. Focus on Vivian. She's the right tone for press optics. Beneath it, a reply from the hotel's PR coordinator. Understood. Vivian will be positioned as the primary contact moving forward. No stutter, no caveats. Just clean removal. Like cutting a name from a seating chart. I stared at the screen. My fingers didn't tremble. I didn't swear or shout or even blink. Instead, I hit reply all, typed, "Thanks for the update. I'll be reviewing all visual and legal placements moving forward." No exclamation mark, no smiley, just a period, a full stop. Because the most powerful thing you can say to someone who's pretending not to notice you is, "I see you." Within 5 minutes, I had 3 missed calls from the assistant, 2 from Odessa's number. I didn't answer. I took my time, got dressed, ate breakfast. Then, around 10 a.m., I stepped out onto the rooftop viewing deck where I knew she'd be. She was standing alone, staring out at the skyline like a matriarch surveying her empire. "Darling," she greeted me, with that smooth, effortless charm she wore like perfume. "You've been so quiet. I hope you're not letting the press visuals get under your skin. It's just optics, not affection." I walked up beside her. Let the pause stretch until it turned uncomfortable. "You don't get to call it affection when you're deleting me," I said. She turned to look at me. There was a flicker in her eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or the realization that I wasn't here to be soothed. "I'm not trying to delete you," she replied. "I'm trying to preserve momentum. She connects faster, younger demographic. The press listens to her." I gave a small, tired laugh. "You mean she doesn't remind them of you? I do." Her silence answered me more than any defense could have. For years, I kept thinking I was climbing a ladder toward my mother's approval. But now, standing there beside her, I realized it had never been a ladder. It was a treadmill, and she'd been controlling the speed the whole time. I stepped back. "You built this story, Mother," I said softly. "Just don't be surprised when it stops going your way." I walked away without another word. Later that afternoon, I was in the hotel's business center. Printer humming beside me, confirmation emails open on the screen, copies of contracts, invoices, deposit receipts. My company had fronted more than half the trip. Every arrangement carried my name. I filed every document into a secure drive. Marked it. Contingency plan. Halden events. Because if they wanted a legacy without me, they'd build it without my support. If erasing me was part of their legacy plan, then they shouldn't have built it on my signature. I closed the last contract folder, locked the door to the hotel's private meeting room, and opened my laptop with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The screen lit up, and so did my purpose. Every vendor was listed neatly in the event itinerary spreadsheet, color-coded, cross-referenced, designed by me. Every payment confirmation was tied to Halden events. Every contact had my signature. They could cut me from the stage, but they forgot one thing. This production existed because I built it, and I could unbuild it. One by one, I began. First, the vineyard in Tuscany. I called the manager directly. He greeted me by name, warm and professional. I thanked him for the impeccable service and informed him the Caldwell Group would no longer require the space. I arranged for the full deposit to be refunded to my business account. Second, the yacht in Capri. The reservation for the private sunset cruise? Canceled. The deposit was already scheduled to hit my account in the morning. Third, the villa, gone. Fourth, the Vatican's private art tour. I emailed the cultural liaison and explained there had been a change in itinerary. She responded within minutes, apologizing for any inconvenience and confirming the cancellation. Every call was clean, every message polite. professional detachment wrapped in silk. By the time I logged off, the fallout had already begun. The emails would start trickling in by evening. Confused assistants, nervous planners, and eventually, Odessa herself. But I was done with explanations. They erased me from the credits, so I removed them from the experience. Later that evening, I slipped into the hotel's bar to order mint tea, needing something warm and grounding. I hadn't even taken a sip when I heard it. "That's got a sting, huh?" I looked to my left. Vivienne, perched on a velvet stool, swirling a glass of wine with one hand, her posture loose, smile sloppy. She was tipsy, just enough to lose her filter. She took another sip, leaned in like we were old girlfriends. "Odessa said I'd be her public face going forward," she whispered, voice sticky with pride. "The whole legacy thing, the gala, the press. It's kind of poetic, right? You set the table. I just get to sit at the head of it." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I didn't respond. She smiled like she'd won something, and that told me everything I needed to know. I left her there, in her little moment of imagined victory, and returned to my room. No tears, no speeches, just a pen in my hand and a journal half full of clarity. "This isn't revenge," I wrote. "This is release." Then I drafted a short internal memo to my legal team at Halden Events. Effective immediately, place all current and future Caldwell-related engagements under legal review. No services are to be rendered without written reapproval. I hit send. Then I stood, walked to the window, and watched the lights of Florence begin to glow against the dusky sky. It was almost time. I opened the garment bag and pulled out the navy velvet gown I'd brought for the gala. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designed to be noticed, but it fit like armor. I dressed with precision, no panic, no shaking hands. Then I picked up my phone and called Marco, the maitre d' at the rooftop restaurant. "Hi, Marco, it's Diana Halden," I said calmly. "Can I stop by for 5 minutes before tonight's event begins? I'd like to confirm a small change in logistics." "Of course, Ms. Halden," he said, warm and eager. "Anything you need." As I hung up, I glanced at myself in the mirror. Not the version they'd tried to erase, not the girl begging for a chair, but the woman who designed the entire damn table. They planned to humiliate me publicly, so I made sure the fallout would be just as visible. From the quiet shadows near the kitchen alcove, I watched the show unfold exactly as they rehearsed it. Candle-lit tables, designer gowns, champagne flutes raised high. Odessa stood center stage, resplendent in emerald silk, a forced youthfulness clinging to her posture. The applause rained over her like confetti. Vivienne sat at her right hand, smiling with the soft humility of someone who knew they were being handed something they hadn't earned. She leaned in as Odessa spoke, nodded on cue, laughed when prompted, like a well-trained echo. My name wasn't on the guest list, not even as a footnote, but I was here, watching every moment, every speech, every lie served on a silver tray. Marco glanced at me from the corner. I gave him the slightest nod. As dessert arrived, a towering millefoglie Odessa insisted be flown in from Milan. Marco approached the table. He leaned down and murmured something into her ear. I saw her blink, then frown. She waved him off. Marco stepped back, respectfully persistent. This time he spoke a little louder, just enough for a few heads to turn. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Halden, but we'll need a new form of payment to continue service. The previous guarantee has been revoked." Odessa gave a brittle laugh. "That's absurd! Use the corporate card." "We tried. It declined." The room shifted. Laughter paused. Forks clinked against china. Odessa's face drained of color, just slightly, but enough for those who knew her to notice. She reached for her purse, realized she didn't have it. Richard, one of her board allies, leaned in. "Is there a problem, Odessa?" I watched the edges of her world begin to fray. And I said nothing. I slipped out before the entire structure buckled under the weight of its own arrogance. There was no need for me to stay. The next morning, it began. My phone buzzed before I finished my espresso. "Don't panic," my PR consultant said, voice clipped and fast. "Odessa's team is trying to control the damage. They're feeding a story to a few blogs." "What kind of story?" She sighed. "That you snapped. Emotional distress. Overstepped. There's already a headline. Event planner snaps at mother's gala." I didn't answer right away. I just closed my eyes and let the silence wrap around me like armor. "They're spinning it hard, Diana. You need to respond before it gets traction." I didn't. Not yet. An hour later, a friend from New York sent me a screenshot. An anonymous quote, conveniently timed, published in a society column. "It's hard watching someone unravel, especially when they used to be so promising." Attributed, of course, to a source close to the family. I stared at it. Read it twice. Then I opened my voice memo app and hit record. "My name is Diana Halden," I said quietly. "And I'm not unraveling, I'm remembering." Later that afternoon, I met with someone who owed me a favor. A journalist. Quiet, principled, tired of being told to keep things pretty. I laid it all out. Emails, vendor contracts, payment records, timestamps. I didn't ask for a hit piece. "I don't want drama," I told him. "I want clarity. And I want the truth to be louder than the myth she's trying to sell." He nodded. "You're not the first person Odessa tried to rewrite." That night, I slept with my phone face down. No alerts, no noise. Let them scramble. Let them spin. They wanted to break me in public, so I handed them the spotlight and let the truth echo. By the time I opened my eyes, the sun had already claimed half the room. My phone was glowing with missed calls, unread messages, and one lone voicemail from Odessa. I pressed play, letting her voice float through the stillness. "This is embarrassing, Diana. Please stop." No apology, just control disguised as concern. The kind of message you leave when you're more worried about what people think than what you did. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat at the small desk by the window, sipped coffee, and reread the statement I'd written weeks ago, the one I had never intended to use. Until now. At noon, Odessa announced a reconciliation brunch in the hotel's conference lounge. A curated list of guests, select press, just enough velvet and glass to make it look like diplomacy instead of damage control. I wasn't invited, but I walked in anyway. The moment the door opened, forks paused mid-air. Conversations clipped off like a power outage. Odessa turned in her seat, lips tight, hands folded with intentional calm. Vivian blinked. Callum looked down at his plate. I didn't rush. I crossed the room slowly, heels echoing louder than anyone's voice. A folder rested under my arm. I stopped beside Odessa's table, set the folder down with a soft thud. "You all deserve to know what really happened." Odessa stood. "Diana, this isn't the time." "It never is, according to you, but I'm done asking." I opened the folder. Page by page, screenshots, invoices, bank transactions, emails, each one printed in crisp black ink, each one tracing the erasure, subtle, deliberate, strategic. "This," I said, holding up the copy of her email to the press team, "is how you remove someone without saying their name." I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just read. This is what erasure looks like when power fears accountability. And this, I lifted the last page, a vendor cancellation confirmation, is what consequence looks like when someone finally says no. Silence. Odessa tried to smile, but her voice wavered. "We're family, Diana. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Are we?" I tilted my head. Then why was I never allowed to speak without being edited? A few guests exchanged glances. One journalist quietly tapped record on their phone. Callum stood and left the room. Vivian paled, but stayed seated. Odessa's expression cracked. Not rage, not regret. Just something brittle breaking beneath the surface. I closed the folder. "I don't need a seat anymore," I said. "I brought my own table. And I don't need an apology. Just distance." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You can keep the spotlight. I'll keep my name." And I walked out. No applause, no cameras, just a hallway echoing with the sound of my heels, and a future I wasn't afraid to walk into. Some stories don't need a sequel, just a clean ending, signed in your own handwriting. I left Florence without fanfare. No dramatic exit through the lobby, no teary glances back at the hotel facade. Just a silent, one-way ride to the airport, my luggage packed with dignity instead of souvenirs. At the Alitalia counter, I upgraded to first class using points my business had earned over a decade of flawless events. No guilt, no hesitation. From the plane window, the city unfolded below, rooftops like patchwork, history baked into stone and sun. But I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt free. I didn't check my phone. Not because I was avoiding the chaos, because I already knew how it ended. The moment I stepped into my apartment back in Chicago, I noticed the difference. Not in the furniture or the air, but in myself. The old version of me would have unpacked and organized within an hour. This time, I let my suitcase sit. I made tea, turned on Miles Davis, and watched the rain dance across the windows. Peace doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it just stops asking for permission. A few days later, emails started trickling in from vendors across Europe. "Odessa's team hasn't responded to balance requests. We were told you weren't involved anymore. That seems to be incorrect." Another wrote simply, "No one wants to guarantee her events now." Too much drama, too little honor. I said nothing, just archived the messages and moved on. Then, an envelope arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, a short note. "I regret how this was handled. You are stronger than I gave you credit for. No love, no mom, just Odessa." It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. I didn't frame it, didn't burn it. I tucked it into the back of my journal, where unfinished things go. A week later, gossip sites lit up with a blog post from an anonymous industry insider. They used me, told me to smile, wear her colors, speak her script. I wasn't her daughter, I was just convenient. Everyone assumed it was Vivian. She denied it publicly, but disappeared from Odessa's events afterward. Quietly, completely. Some legacies crumble with scandal. Others just fade. 6 months passed. I found myself standing on a sunlit terrace in Positano, clipboard in hand, finalizing florals for a celebrity's daughter's wedding. The air smelled of sea salt and lemon trees. The laughter behind me was real. A junior planner leaned close and whispered, "You're the woman who walked away from that family in Florence, right?" I didn't answer, just smiled. Some names you earn, some names you reclaim. Later that night, I opened my journal. The first entry, once filled with confusion and fear, now had a new line beneath it. They tried to unname me. I renamed myself. Healing isn't about forgiveness. It's about not waiting to be forgiven. It's the power to rewrite your own ending, without permission, without applause, just the sound of your own pen on paper. You can rebuild your legacy, but only if you're brave enough to walk away from the one that broke you. Before I go, let me leave you with this. I used to think family loyalty meant staying quiet, enduring, playing the role someone else wrote for you just to keep the peace. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Peace that cost you your identity isn't peace, it's erasure. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from a place you were expected to shrink and grow somewhere else on your own terms. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been made to feel like your presence was optional, let this be your reminder. You don't have to stay where you're not seen. You are allowed to redraw your boundaries. You are allowed to reclaim your name. You are allowed to start over, no matter how late in the story. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to step away from people you loved in order to finally love yourself? Do you think forgiveness always needs to be spoken, or can it live quietly in your decision to move on? Let me know in the comments. Drop a 1 if this story touched something in you. or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, that's okay too. Tell me why. I read every comment. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, human, don't forget to subscribe. There's always another chapter, and you might just see yourself in the next one. Thank you for being here.